Well, that's a UN Special Representative of the Secretary General on Sexual Violence in Conflict, Pramila Patten. Well, she now joins us in the studio. Good morning. Thank you so much for making out time to speak to us today.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
Right. So tell us more about your tour of duty.
Well, as you know, I have a mandate established by the Security Council to provide coherent and strategic leadership on the question of prevention and response to conflict-related sexual violence. And I took office in June 2017 and set my strategic priorities for the mandate, notably prevention, through justice and accountability as a deterrent, through effective and consistent prosecution, but also through addressing the root causes of sexual violence with gender inequality and discrimination, marginalization and poverty as some of its invisible drivers. Right. And secondly, the survivor-centered approach, which is critical because, as I said, the mandate has the face of a survivor. And for that reason, field missions are critical for me. And this is my second visit to South Sudan. And in addition to my engagement with government stakeholders, I have prioritized engagement with survivors in Juba, but also in Yambio. And I must say that the visit has been very successful. Yes. And I have met the actors, the relevant actors that are relevant for my work, because this is not work that I can do alone from New York. But I need the support of many stakeholders. We have to work hand in hand. And I'm also extremely happy with the support that I have from UNMISS and the Office of the Senior Women Protection Advisor, but also the UN country team, because I have an advocacy mandate, and the implementation of my work is done through the UN country team.
Great. As you did mention, this is your second visit to South Sudan. Now, what is your impression based on your visit this time around on the situation related to conflict-related sexual violence and the previous one? How will you compare the difference?
Well, certainly a lot has changed since 2018. Now the implementation of the revitalized peace agreement is in process, from an action plan with SSPDF, an action plan with SPLA-IO, an action plan with the police on which my office worked and provided technical support. We have a joint action plan. There is ongoing work being done through the Joint Implementation Committee. I have met with new stakeholders, the Minister of Defense, the Minister of Justice, the Minister of Gender. But what is also quite revealing is from my engagement with survivors and civil society organization is that women are not benefiting from the dividends of peace yet, and we have a long way to go. And when it comes to sexual violence, it is clear that sexual violence continues to occur, and in fact has increased exponentially. And just to give you some data, in 2022, UNMISS has documented and verified 96 incidents of conflict-related sexual violence perpetrated against 225 survivors, marking an increase from 2021. And the majority of survivors are women, including pregnant women and a lactating mother, followed by girls as young as 13 years old, who were targeted and subjected to different forms of conflict-related sexual violence. And in comparison, UNMISS had documented 115 incidents of conflict-related sexual violence affecting 214 survivors, 145 women, 39 girls, 29 men, and 1 boy in 2021. So you see the increase. And there's also a contextual and geographical analysis which has revealed that Southern Unity State, as being a CRSV hotspot where civilians suffered and continue to be subjected to conflict-related sexual violence during the second quarter. And according to UNMISS, again, the Human Rights Division, there is an exponential surge in sexual and gender-based violence and conflict-related sexual violence, with a 218% increase in CRSV during the second quarter of 2022. So this is very, very disturbing and calls for a visit. So I'm happy that I have prioritized South Sudan.
Yes, and just recently the Minister of Defense spoke and said that sexual gender-based violence or conflict sexual abuses have reduced in the country because of the punitive measures that they have introduced, like military courts, to try this kind of cases. As an expert in this, how important are these military courts to operate in reducing conflict-related sexual violence?
Well, clearly the military courts are very, very important. And as the Minister of Defense mentioned to me during my meeting with her, that she really wants to move away from that era of impunity. Mm-hmm. And the military courts are a step in that direction. Mm-hmm. But I think we need more of these mobile courts to go to the victims.
Right.
But there are issues that I also raise concerning military justice, the need for more training of the judges and magistrates, the need for more training for the investigators and prosecutors, but also the more importantly, the need to ensure victim and witness protection.
Right.
And I shared with her what civil society organization and victims shared with me in terms of reprisal following cases tried by the military courts. And very disturbing information about the husband of one of the victims who was actually killed. So there is a fear of reprisal, and I did share this information with the Minister of Defense so that they also look into it and that they adopt appropriate legislation regarding victim and witness protection.
Right, and this is also another follow-up from the Ministry of Gender. They say that they will start registering children who are born out of sexual violence or rape. So will this classification promote more stigma on these children? I mean, from an expert, how important is this?
The plight of these children is of serious concern to me, and it's everywhere in conflict countries that they have been invisible victims for a long time. And that is why when I took office in 2017, I started advocacy around these children who have rights under the Convention on the Rights of the Child. It was really out of a realization that there was a huge policy gap, and that in many countries where they have laws, for example, on reparations, children born of rape were not seen as victims. Mm-hmm. So after 2 years of advocacy, there was a Security Council Resolution 2467, which was adopted in 2019, which recognized for the first time that these children have rights distinct from their mothers under the Convention on the Rights of the Child, but also connected with their mothers under the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, and made a number of recommendations, including mandating me to prepare a special report on the question. The report is before the Security Council and will be debated very soon before the Council. So I'm very pleased if the Minister of Gender is taking the issue very seriously, because I have met yesterday during my field trip to Yambio many children born of rape, and I have heard, I have received disturbing information about lack of a birth certificate. Yeah. But it's not only about the law, because I'm told that the law does not prohibit these children from having a birth certificate, but it's customary practice for birth certificate not to be given if the father is unknown.
To mothers, yeah.
So it's about implementing the law and ensuring that the rights of these children and their mothers are transmitted.
All right. Now, it must be heartbreaking for you listening to these children, listening to these victims in Western Equatorial State and being with them firsthand, getting firsthand information from them. What next for you after this visit? How will you use this information to try to address and help these survivors?
Well, these mothers and their children need more than solidarity and empathy. We really need to come up with solutions for them on the ground, and that's precisely what I intend to do in terms of implementing the recommendations that I made in that special report to the Security Council, including not only ensuring that laws are implemented and new laws adopted to ensure that their rights are fully respected in line with international norms and standards, but ensuring that they receive the support that they need in terms of access to education, to health, and that their mothers have access to livelihood support to be able to look after them. Mm-hmm. And I intend to design some projects with relevant UN agencies for them.
All right. Just finally, before we let you go, in 2014, your office and the South Sudan government signed a joint communique to address conflict-related sexual violence. Has this had any impact in addressing the situation on the ground, and how helpful and important was it?
Well, it was very important, and it remains very important, this agreement between the United Nations and the government of South Sudan. But as I have flagged to a number of government officials that I met, this is unfinished business. The joint communique contained a number of priority areas, the three main pillars being justice sector reform, security sector reform, and service provision for survivors. And a lot of work has been done and is in progress when it comes to security sector reform, but I have not seen much done in terms of justice sector reform. And so when it comes to service provision, the office has supported a number of projects in a number of areas, but we need to do more for South Sudan in terms of service provision. I think we are lagging behind when it comes to justice sector reform, and I did highlight this to the Minister of Justice. So my priority is to ensure that there is an implementation plan, which I flagged to the Vice President and other ministers that I met. And I understand that a focal point, a high-level focal point, has now been appointed. So my priority to ensure that the special advisor in the Office of the President, recently appointed, continue the work. And first and foremost is to finalize an implementation plan that needs to be validated by the UN and the government, and to move forward with the other pillars underpinning the joint communique.
Pramila, thank you so much for your time. Just before you head out, what is your final message?
My final message is I want to express my solidarity to all the victims, and to tell them that the United Nations stand with them, and that we will not let them down, that international humanitarian law and international human rights law is not a vain promise. But also to the perpetrators, I really want to send a strong message to them that the era of impunity is over. It's not going to be cost-free to rape a woman or a child, a man or a boy, and that justice will prevail, and that we are moving away from the norm of impunity into a culture of justice and accountability.
Right.
Thank you.
Pramila Patten, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Well, she is the Special Representative of the UN Secretary General on Sexual Violence in Conflict, and she has just concluded her visit to South Sudan.
If you have a strong view on that story, please don't hesitate to share your thought with us, and our text message line is 09121770141. This is the Miraya Breakfast Show. Good morning.